Soy Cerecita Blanco, Dios sister, and today we're reading Saturnastra Monkey King. This is chapter 13, part 1. The following morning, he was not at all surprised to hear the report from one of Edith's informers. The humans were riding against him, and after the situation, he started getting the visitors out of the garden, and before leaving, Theobald said, "And we will be more than happy to fight alongside with you, Abel the Monkey King. You are not the only one, but this is a mess we had to solve ourselves, and I would be remiss if disaster came your way because of us," said Abel, smiling. "This enemy is more formidable than any forces you have encountered," warned Theobald. "Worst comes to worst, we will just flee into the forest as we have always done," said Abel. "This isn't the sort of problem you can run away from," repeated Theobald, "and I feel that there's a traitor in your midst." "A traitor never, an idiot perhaps," said Abel, guessing who might be behind this entire mess, and he added, taking Theobald's hand, "Look here, Theobald, everything's going to be fine. We Nagas are survivors, and what are to us a few humans in comparison to the jungle that is the daily lives in our forest?" And Theobald patted Abel's head and ear lightly, and before having his hand slapped away. And Abel was as soft and furry as Theobald had imagined, and he dreaded the thought that such a cute, adorable little creature would be put to the sword. And Abel called out to him, and he repeated, "Everything's going to be fine." Theobald gave him a sad smile, the type of look one gives to a loved one before closing the coffin over their face. And after this goodbye, Abel went with the other Nagas to help pick up whatever they could not live without. And Seer too heard the news. And his assistants started dispersing, and the winds were flying overhead and were informing the Nagas that the pleasure palace was going to be abandoned, and the main items they took were the books and whatever food remained. And Seer did not seem to mind the fate of his tower, and the only thing he found annoying was the prospect of moving because of puny humans, and he said to Abel, "You could fight to protect our home, and the palace we just built. That won't be necessary, it would all work out in the end," said Abel, smiling. "If you say so," said Seer, pouting. It was before leaving for good. Abel and his friends did a final performance for the Nagas, and it was called the Flamenco Opera, and it was about a girl who did not want to get married, and her mother used to scold her for her rebellious spirit, and it was exemplified by the solo of the dancer maiden, dressed like a bullfighter, and the middle of it got a bit up when the antler guy showed up, and in the end she found a rounded stud and spoiled herself and her mother's plans of marrying her off to a guy she didn't love, and the curtain then fell on Abel's fun, and he grew somber as he thought of the problems that lay ahead of him. And normally he would have taken his time to return to his tower in the island of Rubidos, and instead he chose the path less traveled to make it there within a day. And when he returned to the tower, he found a strange gift from his brother, and he opened the little green box with a white ribbon, and he found inside a slimy, milky white pearl. And he took the pearl and looked through his drawers looking for a piece of his staff. And he punched his head with the knuckle of his index finger when he remembered what it had become of it. And he went outside the tower into the gardens, and the bush now had somewhat of a semblance of a tree. And each time a breeze passed by, it released a bit of a bluish-white spores. And he took a bit of the spores and he tasted it. And since he was not dying, he figured that the weird vegetation was benign. And he buried his pearl under the roots of the strange thing growing in the garden. And he was not planning to rely on his brother's powers for this fight. It wasn't so much as pride as he did not want his brother to be indirectly responsible for more deaths. And Marduke and the others were right, and he had underestimated humans' obsessions over pretty baubles. And with a heavy step he returned to the tower to eat the meal Garganta had so patiently made for him. And before his desk stood a pleasant-smelling green vegetable with pieces of lamb meat. And the food in specific never failed to bring a smile to his face. "Happened?" asked Garganta. "I don't know. Forces are too scattered at the moment, and the main enemy army approaches," said Abel, sipping his soup. and the promised to slow them down by any means necessary. However, they are at the heels of a truth retreating from the garden. Worries raised up, answered Gargantua. I see, and if we are lucky, a good portion of them will make a quick stop. And from what I heard from Ada, Carabina is a big fan of lightning wars, and they will be upon us in a month, even with steel bus slowing them down. And the following morning, the birds came with more information on the enemy movements, and at the moment two pirate fleets were coming from either side to enter Lusitania from the island of Rubidius. And smiling coyly, he said, a classical encirclement strategy. Garganta, looking through one of Abel's quirky picture books, suggested, countervalue? Nah, Carabina's a religious man, and he wanna turn around to save a few scrubs, but maybe I'm not giving him enough credit, thought Abel. If he has a list, then give her a green light, and just remember a statutory limitation on this sort of business, and we could also start them. That's always a good strategy. They first said Gargantua. Abel then called for the birds and mobilized the atom mages, and the atom mages modified the words in the storage units, and since it was wartime, all trade in the south was suspended, and the non-combatant personnel were evacuated into the caves, and the entire force was expected to be a fighting arena soon. And for the final preparation, Patty was summoned to Abel's side, and she did not see much of it until her husband was his usual metal self, and he said to her, I am here to strip you of your baptism and personal possessions, and you're hereby exiled from the forest. Why? Asked Patty, shocked. You know what you did, said Winston sternly. But wait, I don't understand, said Patty, alarmed. What part of the non-disclosure agreement did you not understand? Asked Abel sarcastically. We told you not to talk about our business to people that could not be trusted. But, repeated Patty. Go back to your family, Patty, said Abel, scratching at her skin. And much to her dismay, her pelt was shed, and as soon as Abel touched her, and through that violent fashion, she regained her humanity. And let me at least, said Patty, sobbing. Goodbye, Patty, said Abel, pointing towards the door, and before she had the time to protest, one of the gorilla men had entered the room and taken Patty. And turning to Wisdom, Abel commented, You seem oddly unfazed by your wife's betrayal. She said her purpose, pity that she could not keep her mouth shut when talking to people from her former life. But I suppose some things cannot be helped, said Winston, smiling, and he added, Well, back to the matter at hand. I was thinking we should set up human traps. Last time we did, you guys got carried away and forgot where most of them were located, and we still trip on our own traps from time to time. I don't think there's any need to add new ones, said Abel, remembering the traps that litter their forest. What of the dragon? Do you think they will help? Asked Wisdom. I don't know, said Abel, and he added, It is possible, but I would rather not rely on them. The ideal solution would be for the humans to just leave us alone, said Wisdom. Ah, yes, but we don't live in an ideal world, do we, Wisdom, said Abel, sarcastically. The army of Carabina's army raced on restlessly towards Lusitania, and in spite of its religiosity, it was a traditional medieval army heavily reliant on cavalry and light infantry, and the stallions alone required maintenance. And Carabina was not familiar with the way the Nagas worked in battle, and he was also not too used to fighting in the forest. And he had heard tales of the expertise in siege battle. However, this brilliance was due to the words of the Invisible Army's sleeper agent, and about 200 members of his army were secretly Nagas pretending to be humans. And they regularly informed their peers of the movements of the army and its weakness, and the main issue in Candra was the cult of hexing, and with so much emphasis on iron, peasants who had otherwise made food crops had overnight become rudimentary smiths, and the Naga knowledge was producing some of the shabbiest pieces of iron that mankind has ever seen. And this combined with Carabina's pacification campaign has caused the country to be blacklisted and slowly isolated from the other feudals, and in a sense, attacking the Nagas was a desperate attempt to save its crumbling economy, and the soldiers of Carabina hoped to save their empire by stealing the gems of the so-called weak Nagas. And it was true that the Nagas had fled from most of the battles they had ever engaged in. However, they fought with all of their might in battles that actually counted, And as soon as the first front line Naga turns his back on the enemy, the rest usually follow. And this prudent but seemingly cowardly behavior had given the Nagas a fame of being cowards and weaklings. And non-humanoid ever bothered to notice that the Naga armies rarely suffered heavy casualties. And as things stood for Carabina, he had about a month or so to steal as much precious gems and food supplies from the Naga, to buy grain from the surrounding territories in order to continue his military campaigns, and he also hoped that they to raid the fields. To fight the Naga magic, he believed he had the protection of the goddess, and to slow him down, Abel decided to speak with the goddess, and to summon her, he killed a lamb and burned his fat over the fire, and the scent of blood and roasted lamb with olive juice summoned the goddess Hexin. Hexin frowned when she saw the Abel eating her offering. "You big thief, you know that I only speak with humans," complained Hexin. "And yet you came, because you know I had the spirit of a human," said Abel, and he added, taking out a jar, right inside this little pickle jar. "I want to ask you to tell that petty," and then he added, "I want to ask you to tell the pet human used to turn his armies back, and if he does, I will feed his starving people," said Abel. "Why don't you make this offer to Carabina himself?" suggested Hexin sarcastically, and her steel black frame glistened dark red under the burning sun. "You know why not. And you give those humans an arm and they take your whole leg, and you feed them one day, and suddenly they start treating you like tributaries, and you can't work with folks like that," complained Abel. "I don't see how that is any of my problem," said Hexin, laughing. "I thought the gods were supposed to care about their followers," said Abel, folding his arms. "You clearly don't know how the gods work." And we get a faint reply here, a cryptic sign there, followed by a minor blessing here and there, and boom, you have a huge cult following. "Lara tried the whole direct approach, and look how she ended up," explained Hexin. "Lara's dead, by the way." "Fine, if you don't want help, then at least promise to stay out of the way," suggested Abel. "No," said Hexin flatly. "You seem to be mistaking this conversation with a negotiation, and I'm telling you to stay out of the way if you would," insisted Abel. "How dare you speak to such a god in such a fashion, puny human, puny mortal," said Hexin, burning like brimstone and puffing up. And she deflated somewhat when she noticed that her pump was being ignored, and Abel had just taken a bite from the leg of the lamb and proceeded to eat the entire sacrifice, and after he completed, he said, "Get off your high horse, little Hexin, and this isn't the only landmass in the world." "Really," said Hexin thoughtfully, and she faded away, ruminating about sending missionaries to other parts of the world to increase her worship. Since Hexin was a no good, Abel decided to go speak with Carabina himself. Not much for pomp and diplomacy, Abel entered the ocean, and he drew with his staff a stylization of Carabina's camp, and Abel placed his head inside the water and submerged himself into the map. And since he was using water as a medium, this spell also brought with him an aura of fishes, and a thin mist surrounded the camp, and from time to time the guards saw shadow which resembled colossal fishes, and at other times they saw more tenebrous forms like mantas and sharks. And Abel waited till Carabina was alone in his tent, and Abel saw the warrior priest carrying his steel armor praying to his perfect blade, and Carabina trembled as a cold icy shield entered the room, and he instinctively looked over his shoulder and naturally saw nothing, and the cold damp air seeped into the tent, and the weapons and items started getting foggy, and a faint dew started building up in most of the items near the ground, and Carabina lifted his blade and put it away to protect it from the damp air. And the thin fog manifested into a pale see-through shade of Abel and the surrounding fishes, and they saw in and out of the tent and through Carabina himself, and after getting used to the frigid sensation, Carabina said with a strong voice, "An illusion, nothing else." "Perhaps, but I can keep you and your men from having a good night's sleep," said Abel coolly. And even in this faint form, the lustrous bubbles the humans desired were visible, and Carabina couldn't help but stare at the large, starry sapphire ring that had caught his attention the first time he met Abel in the town of Elbudia. Narrowing his eyes, Abel then said, recognizing Carabina, "Aha, yes, I remember you. You're that old geezer that was obsessing about my fat ring. If you wanted so badly, you could have just paid for it like a normal person. Must we go to war over worthless baubles?" If it is so worthless to you, then give us 50 crates of those gems each year, suggested Carabina, sitting down in his cot. And just what sort of fool do you take me for? Said Abel. The fact that you are here proves to me that you are afraid of me, said Carabina, smiling. I'm not one who enjoys bullying weaklings, and I am not the sort of person who turns the other cheek. Turn back, and I will send food to your people for this winter, and only this winter. And I suggest next year you trade the hammer for the sickle and be done with this ironmonger business. Abel stopped the moment he saw Carabina's turning beet red, and he sensed that a sermon was imminent, and he had said his piece, and all that was left was to see how things played out. And Carabina's army continued with their march, and along the way they took over small towns and villages, and the folks did not resist, but some even welcomed them. And those smart enough to hit the Nuggets warning fled upriver towards the Aragon territory, and the towns that were occupied had their granaries pillaged. And after counting the supplies, half was escorted back home and the other half was sent to the soldiers and townies. And Abel could not get over how thankful the fools were, and Carabina had stolen from them, but they were happy to finally have enough guards to defend themselves for the Nugget threat. And none of the stolen food ever made it back to Candra, and thanks to Theobald's effort, the supply line was growing ever thinner. And a few weeks before Candra's army arrived to the forest, Abel made a final venture, and this time he approached the generals. And only a small number of the knights of the first were inclined to listen. And an even smaller number believed what Abel was saying, and unlike his conversation with Carabina, he told the knights plainly that they were going to die if they entered the forest. And one of the magic generals said coyly, "We had already deciphered your antidote. That is not going to help you since you are outside and the forest knows his children, and he will not show any mercy to foes," warned Abel, and his small frame and cute demeanor made his warning fall on deaf ear, and humans just seem incapable of taking monkeys seriously. And the soldiers were more apt to listen, especially those who had been drafted into the army. And overnight, the army lost just 1% of its members, and it was a small sum, but a worthy sum in the grand scheme of things, or so Abel wagered. And the following night, Abel arranged for his initial shock and awe strategy, and with any luck, Carabina might turn tail and run, and gathering his magic, Abel summoned forth a hailstorm of flaming birds, who dashed against the tents of soldiers, and panic ruins combined with the false reports originating from the invisible army. And the troops went mad in search throughout the town, and waving his staff, he conjured a chase of the Nuggets moving through the rooftops. And the soldiers tried their best to follow, but failed thanks to the rat maze that were most medieval times. And from time to time, they would trip on random carrot tracks, or they would get shot by real arrows, or they had rocks being thrown at them. And this way of fighting infuriated the knights who were used to open confrontations. And for the coup de grace, Abel conjured up the illusion of a peasant guiding the movement of the knight and covering his escape. And this long enough was to convince the knight that the humans of the town were working against them. And when they were distraught, exist violence is but a step away, and soon the night army were attacking random homes and executing the so-called traitors. And for the humans living in town, it seemed to them that the Carabina's men were finally showing their true colors, and they fled towards the river and took to the nearest boats downstream, and Carabina's men did not give much chase, focusing instead on killing and butchering the so-called traitors. And watching the carnage, Abel could not help but feel guilty, and in the end he turned his back on defending town and focused on the matter at hand. And 3 days later, he was relieved to find out that something good had come out of that entire mess. And shepherds grazing from a nearby village had seen the entire incident. And this village was a subsidiary of Verageddon, and it still had its own messenger networks. And so the villages in Hamlet that hadn't been taken over informed of Carabina's betrayer, and for the rest of the road that lay before him, there were no more storehouses to be found. And using one of the twin rivers, the farmer had fled eastward past the Lusitania Peninsula into the southern kingdom. And much to King's disappointment, the humans did not have the hindsight to burn their summer crops, and they had taken as much as they could and left the rest behind to rot. And his only solace was that the army kept insisting on sending part of the crop back to Candra, and little did Carabina realize that the very few other supply wagons were actually making it back home. And 2 days before reaching the forest, Carabina stood on top of an old tower gazing at the forest through a telescope. And this was unlike any battle he had ever participated. And he was a bit of an odd as to how to approach it. And traditionally he avoided fighting in the forest. But his enemy was within the forest, so what was he to do? Heavy cavalry was clumsy in close terrain, and his only soldier was his goddess, and through her divination she had informed him of the location of the Nagas on the camp. And knowing her gimmick, Abel had spread them out on treetops and below the ground, and he hoped that by doing so he could mess with the goddess's foresight. So she knew where they were on the map, but not whether they were above the trees or on the ground, so he was just getting around her. Even if she could directly lead them to the entrances of the cave, just maneuvering through there was a death trap for clumsy humans. And the goddesses had other limitations as well, and she could only communicate with her high priest and a few select others. And this limited the effectiveness of the goddess's blessings, since in the forest the groupings had to be stretched thin, and to further mess with communication, Abel resorted to deal with the selected others, and the number 20 in total, and they were spread out in the ranks, and his invisible army at least managed to murder 4 prophets, and with their presence means the security was being stopped, and as satisfied with the process, Abel was possessed by a brilliant idea, and he brought out a piece of wood and carved the alphabet into it, and he added the number 10 and followed by the word Chao Pescao, and on the corners he added yes or do it or else. And taking a flat round circle from his pocket, he placed it over the alphabet and he spelled, "What do you want?" Like he made a Ouija board. "At least 6, not 5, not 4, answered Abel. "I don't wanna," spelled the board. "Don't like the ernute and a strap for this time it is," begged Abel. "Yes," answered the board reluctantly, and a few hours passed with nothing eventful occurring in the enemy camp. And Abel, fearful that Ernute had said yes to end the conversation for good, and she was a mischievous little snake goddess, and while her peers had turned from the world, she had maintained a tacit relationship with humans through her talking Ouija board, and depending on her mood, she would call for demons to torment those who call upon her, and all of the time she would pretend to be a recently deceased fellow, and even if she did not particularly know the person, she could collect their memories from their mind and pretend to the board, and on rare occasions she used second sight for the benefit of those who call upon her. Alright, let's just end it here for today. Bye bye and God bless. Alright.